Imagine a book that aspires to be the Iliad, but ends up with less complexity than The Giving Tree, and you have my next Bailey shortlisted review book, The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan. Just a heads up, this is probably going to be the longest review that I've ever done on this channel, and I apologize for that, but I have things to say. This is my least favorite book that I've read in years, easily. I can't remember disliking a book this much in a long time. I absolutely would have DNF'd it if it hadn't been shortlisted for the Baileys. But as it was, I read every single page, didn't even skim, and kept trying to find things that I liked. I don't get off on tearing books apart. And anyway, this is a long book. I spent hours with it. Nobody wants to be miserable for 12 hours. But in the end, beyond my personal taste, I think The Sport of Kings is a bad book. So some of you requested another Jekyll and Hyde review, like what I did for Gwendolyn Riley's First Love, but I can't do a Jekyll part for this, okay? I don't have Jekyll thoughts. Now, I am way in the minority with this opinion. This book has gotten rave reviews from all the major reviewing publications and on Goodreads, and part of me was feeling guilty, like, oh, how real should I get in this video? But the New York Times called it a work of genius. Aminata Forna called it symphonic. I doubt a random YouTube nobody hating on this book could make a dent in Morgan's ego, nor should it. But if you read The Sport of Kings and liked it, and there's a good chance that if you read it, you did like it, and if it would be painful for you to hear it dragged through the mud, just don't watch this review. I'm not filming it to make anybody who liked it feel bad or to change anyone's mind. This response is my reading experience, and I'm going to be honest about it. First, let's get into what The Sport of Kings tries to do, and then I'll go through some of the reasons it falls flat. Beyond any specific goal, this book strives to be epic. It wants to sweep you away. So it'll zoom in on little details like naming every flower or animal in a particular field, and then zoom out and go through the entire geological history of Kentucky. It wants to map the topography of the American landscape alongside the topography of human lives. In our cast of characters, we have 3 generations of the Forge family, a traditional white Southern planting family with a history of owning slaves that then converts its land into a training and breeding facility for thoroughbred racehorses. And we also follow a family in Cincinnati that's Black and struggling to make ends meet. And the 2 family histories converge at a certain point. Through these characters, Morgan looks at the ideas of breeding and social Darwinism, family relationships, personal and national legacies, gender roles, and systemic racial oppression, especially within America's health and criminal justice system. Which sounds like a fascinating book, right? And there's seeds of a wonderful book in here. But what it comes down to is the execution of the ideas. And I know America's fallen down the rabbit hole fast, but we still don't deserve this as our next great novel. It flops and flails on every level you can think of, but I've identified 3 that I'm going to go through. First is the level of sentence by sentence, second is the level of long passages, and the third is the broad thematic level. So first I've selected some sentences to show you how clumsy the word choice is in general, and these are just a few examples. I highlighted dozens of these. It is like the Hall of Note. Sentences like this. Jonathan came at Henry with a wash of wondering disbelief on his face. A wash of wondering disbelief. How is that any more compelling than just saying disbelief or a wash of wonder? Here's another. They all reared back in collective startle. All means collective. Reared back means they were startled. This is pure redundancy. They all reared back in collective startle. Another. His mother bent behind him, so 2 light heads peered samely round the jam. What on earth is the word samely doing in that sentence? You said that 2 similar-looking heads did the same action. Why include the adverb samely? This next might be my favorite. I actually laughed out loud when I read this. He paused for a moment, then made an obscure gesture with his hands held palms up, as if to hold something broad and round, like an orange or something bigger, a globe. Is it an orange or is it a globe? Have you ever looked at another human being's gestures and been like, oh, it looks like she's holding an apple? Or a beach ball? Could be either. After a long paragraph about a storm, we get, the horses smelled like wet dogs. As evocative as that description is, I'm guessing the horses smelled like wet horses. And beyond these weird, bungling choices, the majority of the book is unconscionably overwritten, like this. The older man exited the automobile, stretched briefly with a growling sound of a bear come out of hibernation, and walked around to the passenger side. Okay, Morgan is trying to give you an idea of this man's latent power and energy, even as he performs simple actions. But she could achieve this just by saying, with a bear like growl. Instead, she makes the sentence ridiculous so that after a short, ordinary drive, this man steps out of the car, greets the world like an animal that's been asleep for months, and then walks around to the other side of the car. Every moment of this book is pitched to the edge of melodrama, to the point where the truly big moments, the ones that could earn this level of drama, don't have a chance to stand out. No book that consistently displays such a sloppy command of language should be hailed as a classic. On the second level, and yes, people, we're only on the second level, there were whole passages, especially landscape passages, with some of the most brain-addling, stilted writing I've ever read. And clearly, Morgan wants to capture the grandeur in everyday things. She wants the reader to experience the minute gradations of a sunset, or the sheer variety of life in a creek bed. But there was almost never any flow to these descriptions, and I could feel the author's presence at every moment. It was uncomfortable to see an author working this hard and contorting language this much to try to impress the reader. And yes, occasionally there were moments of beauty, but considering that this book is 560 pages long, as my illustrious grandfather says, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. This Board of Kings reminds me of a polemical essay called I Know Why the Caged Bird Cannot Read by Francine Prose. That's about how stale American high school curricula teach students that the more confusing writing is, the more literary and laudable it is. And I haven't read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sing, so I can't assess her main example. But I love that essay, and I couldn't stop thinking about it while I read this book. It pains me to think of this bloated, messy writing being held up as something aspirational. Okay, and then there's a moment late in the book when Morgan gets absolutely cracked out and starts going Jackson Pollock with the English language. And she's partially in the head of a character at the time, but then she breaks the fourth wall and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Have I committed a literary sin by using such florid language? Because really, I haven't used enough words. There are never enough words to describe the wonders of the universe." And this part actually pissed me off. This is akin to a child playing the piano with its elbows and then with its feet and then turning to you and being like, "Oh, I'm sorry if you don't think this is music, but maybe you're just narrow-minded." I rolled my eyes so hard, I saw my brain. And now for the last section, and believe it or not, what I'm gonna lay out now is what I consider the book's cardinal sin. From now on, I'm gonna mention some plot points, nothing spoilery because the section I'm gonna target is beyond predictable, and I'll save all major twists for you if you want to read it. But if you don't want to know anything about this book going in, you should probably save this part of the video for later. 95% of Morgan's strategy when it comes to conveying themes is to have her characters deliver them word for word. You can find all the main ideas in this book in direct speech from the characters. And you can tell when Morgan gets to the middle of a scene and is like, "Oh, I want the readers to think about this," because she winds up the characters, their mouths pop open, and they soliloquize. Let me give you some examples. So I'll only give one involving the Forge family, although there are legions to choose from. When a woman leaves an unhappy marriage for another man, her last words to her young child are, "This isn't selfishness, it's survival." Okay, that's clearly what Morgan wants the reader to understand about the situation, but it's odd to hear this woman say that in so many words to her child. And now I want to focus on one section of the book so that you get an idea of how much of this there is in a concentrated space. From now on, I'm going to look at the part where we meet a Black family in Cincinnati. And I'm not even going to use any examples from the preacher character because he's the only one with an excuse for talking the way he does. Every character in this book talks like a preacher. A little boy named Almond is the protagonist of the section, and he has a Black mother who raises him and a white father who flits in and out of their lives. And one day when he's still a really young child, his mother tells him that his father is coming to visit. And she says, "I'm begging you, Almond. Your mama is begging you. You need to get some good behavior and be on it. Be my little lamb, because I need this family. That man's got my heart in his body. If we stay on our best behavior, maybe we can get him to stay a while." This just rang so false to me for a mother to look her child in the eye and express an adult sentiment this bluntly, like, you need to behave because I need this family. More likely, she would have just told him to behave and that it was important, and her words would have been dripping with her unspoken thoughts about getting the father to stay. But instead, this moment ends up feeling like a shortcut. Things only get more extreme from there. The mother develops an autoimmune disease, and when she goes to a doctor to get medication prescribed for her, the doctor says to her, his patient, "Lupus doesn't get much research. Mostly colored women get it. There's really nothing to do but take steroids. We're all still following a script that was written 50 years ago." And at another point, he says, "I'm just a doctor. I didn't make the system, and I can't change it." Again, clearly those are the takeaways of these visits, but to have them so neatly packaged from the mouth of the doctor, to have them gift wrapped for the reader without even a whiff of a believable doctor-patient interaction, it's just lazy. Then when Almond's mother goes to a hearing about being taken off welfare, one of the people deciding her case is a white man and the other is a Black woman. And for no reason that I can discern, Morgan writes this scene like it's the script of a play. So when the Black woman finally says, "I'm sorry, we can't help you, we're going to take you off welfare," this is what happens. This is genuinely in the book. Parentheses. Long silence. Then the Black woman looks down at the paperwork. The defendant, Almond's mother, instead of crying, turns stonily to audience, proceeds monologue, barely audible. Then in italics. "Lady, I was looking at your face and I was trusting in the familiar, your plum eyes and wide nose, your color. I thought it was a homing beacon." And she continues the speech from there. So instead of doing the work of writing a legitimate scene, having Almond's mother walk into the room, notice this Black woman and look at her features and have it be implied to the reader that she feels more hopeful having this woman in her hearing, instead we get this cop-out that is beyond amateur, and it's not even a stylistic signature of the book. It's just this scene. So I can only assume that what happened is that even Morgan couldn't have Almond's mother say to this woman, "I thought you'd help me 'cause you're Black." So clearly her only alternative was to have her pivot to the audience and say it. And then the part that maybe irked me the most. As a teenager, Almond gets caught up in some minor drug dealing to help his mom out, and he finds himself in the middle of a riot one day, and this is what he thinks. How the fuck could he get out of this? Not just the looting, but his whole stupid life. He wasn't a fucking dealer. He was just a 15-year-old kid. What kind of game had he been playing? Enough wrong turns and you run in a circle. This is just a paint-by-number script of what any humdrum white author would put in the head of a young, troubled Black character. And Almond wouldn't think, "I'm just a 15-year-old kid." That's what readers think. That's what Morgan thinks. Almond would think something like, "Jesus, I'm way out of my league," or just anything else. Actually, anything else. There is not a drop of integrity in this book when it comes to portraying genuine human thought and communication. None. Every moment is at the mercy of the author's transparent agenda. Every character is ready to open up to the very deepest part of themselves at the drop of a hat, and is podium ready, ready to speak like a textbook, like a persuasive essay, like anything other than a spontaneous human. And I think these themes are so important that that's the aggravating part. I don't think there's a single topic that's more important to American society right now than reforming the criminal justice system. I'm not asking Morgan to abandon these timely thoughts, but I want them to be treated with respect and plausibility and God forbid, a little bit of nuance. Like, am I reaching for the stars? This was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Okay, sorry. I told myself I would stay calm. So, in summary, to me, the fact that this is getting near universal praise is a symptom of the death of close reading. It says that readers want to be lectured. It demonstrates once again that you don't need to write your themes all that well as long as they're important and you check the boxes and say the things you're supposed to say. And it conveys to the general public that this is poetry and lyricism, and you are meant to be confused. The more distracting the word choice, the better the book. There are a few positive things I could drop in. Some of the sections with side characters were beautiful, like with young Maryleen and old Barlow. The scene with crossing the Ohio River was intense. There were 2 funeral scenes that were still overwritten, but much less, so that the emotions could shine through. But to give these examples any more weight than that is to treat this book like an abusive relationship. And people, if it's good 10, 15% of the time, it's not good. Love yourselves. I've never said this before on my channel, but I actively discourage you from reading this book, and I wouldn't give it to my enemies. I expect this opinion to be really unpopular. Seriously, if you go look at the whole first page of Goodreads reviews, you'll be like, Jen, what book did you read? And trust me, I've been asking myself the same question if I have some kind of a chemical imbalance for thinking this book is terrible. But please feel free to express your disagreement below. I've commented on a lot of other people's Bailey's videos to say that I didn't have the same reaction to the book that they did, and I welcome you to do the same. I've said my piece, and you can definitely say yours. Okay, I'm gonna go stick my head in a bucket of ice water and count to 1,000. Bye. Thanks for watching.